Maya slipped through the grand lobby of the Westbrook Hotel, her steps quick and practiced. After 3 years working here, she had mastered the art of being invisible. That's what the training manual called it. Seamless. Service? What it really meant was learning how to exist in the corners of rooms filled with people who would never remember your face. Room 512. Needs fresh towels, her walkie-talkie crackled. Maya adjusted her neat black uniform and nodded to herself. As housekeeping supervisor, she spent her days making sure everything ran smoothly behind the scenes of one of the city's most expensive hotels. The elevator doors opened to reveal a couple draped in designer clothes, the woman wearing sunglasses despite being indoors. They didn't step aside to let Maya enter, so she waited for the next one, eyes down as she'd been taught. The hotel management called it respectful distance. Maya called it what it was, being treated like furniture. "Big day today," said Raj, her colleague at the front desk, as Maya passed by with her cart. "The Harrington Foundation people are checking in." "Bunch of music industry folks," Maya nodded. The Harrington Charity Gala was the biggest event of the spring season. For 3 days, the hotel would be filled with famous musicians, producers, and wealthy donors. For the staff, it meant longer hours, higher stress, and guests who were even more demanding than usual. "Just what we need," she said with a small smile. "More people snapping their fingers for service," Raj laughed. "At least the tips might be good." Maya wasn't so sure. In her experience, the richest guests tipped the worst. They lived in a different world, one where people like her faded into the background of their perfect lives. By afternoon, the lobby had transformed into a buzzing hive of activity. Expensive luggage piled up near the check-in desk. Security guards with earpieces stood near the doors. Maya noticed how everyone seemed to be speaking just a bit louder than necessary, as if wanting to be overheard. "Excuse me," said a voice behind her. Maya turned to find a tall man in a tailored suit looking at her with mild irritation. He had silver-streaked hair and the confident stance of someone used to being in charge. "Could you tell me where the Sapphire Lounge is?" he asked, his eyes already moving past her as if she'd answered. "Of course, sir. It's on the 3rd floor to the right of the elevators." He walked away without acknowledgement. Maya watched him go, noticing how other staff members quickly stepped out of his path. She wondered if he realized they were people too, with lives and dreams as complex as his own. Probably not. The day stretched on endlessly. Maya's team was short-staffed, so she pitched in cleaning rooms herself. By evening, her back ached from changing sheets and scrubbing bathrooms in the massive suites. But the real challenge would be the welcome reception happening in the grand ballroom. "All hands on deck," her manager had announced. "Even supervisors. We need everyone serving drinks and canapes." Maya changed into the formal serving uniform, crisp white shirt, black vest and bow tie, and headed to the kitchen where staff were being briefed. "Remember, these are VIP guests," the event coordinator was saying. "No unnecessary conversation, no asking for autographs. Just blend in and make sure their glasses are never empty." The ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers. Maya carried a tray of champagne flutes, weaving between groups of people whose watches probably cost more than her yearly salary. She recognized a few faces from magazines, a famous composer here, a rock star there. From snippets of conversation she gathered most worked in the music industry. They discussed recording contracts and upcoming albums, awards they'd won and rivals they'd beaten. Maya listened while remaining expressionless, as she'd been trained to do. "The acoustics in Carnegie Hall are overrated," said a woman wearing diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement of her head. "I nearly walked out of that pianist's performance last month." "Speaking of disappointing," replied her companion, "have you heard that new album everyone's raving about?" "Derivative garbage," Maya carefully offered her tray to the group. One man took a glass without looking at her, continuing his story about his vacation home in Italy. Another absently reached for champagne while laughing at something, his elbow knocking against Maya's tray. Cold champagne splashed across her white shirt and down her pants. The man glanced at her, still laughing. "Oh, sorry about that," he said without sounding sorry at all. He turned back to his friends without missing a beat. Maya stood frozen, champagne dripping from her clothes. Not one person in the circle offered her a napkin or asked if she was okay. She might as well have been a malfunctioning drink dispenser, rather than a human being who'd just been embarrassed and would now have to work the rest of her shift in wet clothes. She retreated to the kitchen. blinking back hot tears of humiliation. "What happened to you?" asked Lena, another server. Guest knocked into my tray. "Got champagne everywhere." Maya grabbed a towel and tried to dry herself off. Lena shook her head. "Last year one of them spilled red wine on my shoes and then complained to management that I was in his way." "Did they do anything about it?" "Yeah, they made me apologize to him." The kitchen door swung open and their manager poked his head in. "Maya, why aren't you on the floor?" "We're short-handed as it is." "Sorry, had a small accident." "No time for that. Take a fresh tray and get back out there. The Harrington family just arrived." Maya grabbed another tray of drinks and plastered a professional smile on her face, despite her damp clothes. Back in the ballroom, she noticed a new group had formed around an older couple, the Harringtons themselves, whose foundation funded music programs for underprivileged kids. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. For the next hour, she circulated through the room, ignored by everyone except when they wanted something. Her feet throbbed in her sensible black shoes. The champagne had dried sticky on her pants, but the smile never left her face. "Miss? Miss?" An older woman with perfectly coiffed hair snapped her fingers at Maya. "There's no seafood on this tray. I specifically asked for the shrimp. I'll find some for you right away, ma'am." "See that you do. And bring some of those little caviar things." "The good caviar, not the cheap stuff." Maya nodded and headed back to the kitchen. As she pushed through the swinging door, she heard the woman say to her companion, "The help these days, completely useless." The words stung more than they should have. Maya had grown used to being treated this way, but something about today, maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was the wet uniform, made it harder to let it roll off her back. In the kitchen, chaos reigned. A waiter had dropped a tray of desserts and everyone was scrambling to prepare replacements before the guests noticed the delay. "Where's the shrimp?" Maya asked the head chef. He pointed to a tray being garnished. 2 minutes. While waiting, Maya slipped into the small staff bathroom to check her appearance. The person in the mirror looked tired, her dark hair coming loose from its neat bun, her brown eyes lacking their usual spark. For a moment, she hardly recognized herself. 3 years ago, she'd taken this job as a temporary measure, just until she figured out her next move. Saved enough money to go back to school, maybe. Now here she was, still carrying trays and being snapped at by people who saw right through her. "Is this what you wanted?" she whispered to her reflection. Of course it wasn't. Once she'd had different dreams entirely. Dreams that had nothing to do with making beds or serving drinks to people who couldn't be bothered to say thank you. The door opened, and Lena poked her head in. "Chef's looking for you." "The shrimp's ready." Maya straightened her bow tie and took a deep breath. She had 6 more hours on this shift. 6 more hours of being invisible, of swallowing her pride, of pretending it didn't hurt when people treated her like she was nothing. "Coming," she said, squaring her shoulders. Back in the ballroom, the crowd had grown louder, loosened by expensive champagne. Maya delivered the shrimp to the demanding woman, who took it without acknowledgement and continued her conversation as if Maya had vanished into thin air. As she turned away, Maya caught a few notes from the string quartet playing in the corner. The melody was familiar, a piece she knew well, though from what felt like another lifetime ago. Despite everything, the music made her pause, a small smile touching her lips for the first time that evening. No matter how these people saw her, no matter how small they made her feel, they didn't know everything about her. They didn't know who she really was or what she could do, and maybe, just maybe, they would find out someday. The staff room of the Westbrook Hotel was nothing like the lavish spaces enjoyed by its guests. Hidden in the basement level, it had fluorescent lighting that buzzed constantly and furniture that had seen better days 2 decades ago. But at 3 a.m, when Maya's shift had finally ended, it was blissfully empty. She sank onto the worn couch, too tired to head home just yet. The first night of the Harrington Gala had stretched on endlessly. After the reception came the dinner, and after the dinner came the seemingly infinite requests from guests returning to their rooms. Extra pillows, more ice, complaints about noise that Maya couldn't actually hear but had to address anyway. Her fingers ached from scrubbing bathrooms and carrying trays. Her feet throbbed in her sensible black shoes. But despite her exhaustion, sleep felt far away. In the corner of the room sat an old upright piano. It had been donated years ago by the hotel when they upgraded to the gleaming grand piano, now showcased in the main lobby. This one had yellowed keys and needed tuning, but to Maya it was the most beautiful thing in the room. She glanced around, confirming she was alone, then walked over and lifted the dusty cover. Her fingers hovered above the keys for a moment before pressing down gently. The sound wasn't perfect, but it was music. Real music. Her music. Few people at the Westbrook knew about Maya's past. They saw only the efficient housekeeper, who kept her head down and did her job without complaint. They didn't know about the hours she'd spent practicing scales as a child, or the competitions she'd won as a teenager. They couldn't imagine her at 17, receiving the acceptance letter from Juilliard, her hand shaking so badly she could hardly open the envelope. And they certainly didn't know about her father's sudden illness that same month, the medical bills that piled up, the impossible choice between her dream and her family's survival. Maya began to play softly, a Chopin nocturne that her fingers remembered even after all this time. The melody flowed through the quiet room, filling the space with something that didn't belong in the dingy staff quarters. Something beautiful and sad and hopeful all at once. She closed her eyes, letting the music take her somewhere else, somewhere far from demanding guests and aching feet and sticky champagne stains. I didn't know we had a concert pianist on staff. Maya's hands jerked away from the keys as if burned. She turned to find Mr. Chen, the hotel manager, standing in the doorway. How long had he been there? Her cheeks flushed hot with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. "I was just taking a short break before heading home." Mr. Chen stepped into the room, his expression curious rather than angry. "No need to apologize. That was quite impressive." Maya looked down at her hands, suddenly self-conscious. "It's nothing. Just an old hobby." That didn't sound like nothing to me. He moved closer to the piano. "Where did you learn to play like that?" She hesitated. It had been so long since she'd talked about this part of her life. Sometimes it felt like it had happened to someone else entirely. "I studied for years," she finally said. "I was going to attend Juilliard, actually." Mr. Chen's eyebrows shot up. "Juilliard? And instead you're working here?" The question stung, though she knew he hadn't meant it that way. "Life happens," she said simply. "My father got sick. Someone had to pay the bills." Understanding crossed his face. He nodded slowly. "I see." Maya stood up, suddenly eager to change the subject. "I should get going. Early shift tomorrow." "Wait." Mr. Chen held up a hand. "I have a proposition for you." She paused, wary. In her experience, propositions from men in positions of power rarely ended well for women in positions like hers. Sensing her hesitation, he clarified quickly. "A professional one. Our regular pianist for the lobby bar has been calling in sick more often lately. We could use someone to fill in occasionally. It pays extra, of course." Maya blinked in surprise. "You want me to play? For guests?" "Why not? You're clearly talented, unless you'd rather not." The offer caught her completely off guard. Playing again in public? The thought both thrilled and terrified her. It had been so long. What if she wasn't good enough anymore? But then again, the extra money would help with her father's ongoing medical expenses. And to play real music again on a proper piano. "I'd need to practice," she said. "It's been years since I performed for anyone." Mr. Chen smiled. "The piano in the lobby is available before opening hours. You can use it then if you'd like." Maya nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll do it. Excellent. I'll put you on the schedule for next weekend." He turned to leave, then paused. "By the way, what was that piece you were playing?" "Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major." It was beautiful. After he left, Maya sat back down at the piano, her mind spinning. For years, she'd kept this part of herself locked away, convinced that chapter of her life was closed forever. The thought of opening it again made her heart race. She played a few more notes softly. The familiar melody felt like greeting an old friend after a long absence. There was awkwardness, yes, but underneath it, the deep connection remained. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she should call Mr. Chen tomorrow and tell him she'd changed her mind. Go back to being invisible, to blending into the background where it was safer. But as she gathered her things to leave, Maya couldn't help but feel a tiny spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. The next morning came too quickly. Maya dragged herself out of bed after just 4 hours of sleep. Her small apartment was only a 20-minute bus ride from the hotel, but today the journey felt longer. Her mind kept returning to Mr. Chen's offer and the Chopin piece she'd played the night before. At the hotel, day 2 of the gala was already in full swing. More guests had arrived overnight and the lobby buzzed with activity. Maya moved through her usual routine, assigning rooms to her team, checking inventory, handling special requests. But her thoughts kept drifting to the grand piano sitting in the corner of the lobby. "Earth to Maya," said Raj, waving a hand in front of her face. "You okay?" "You seem distracted," she blinked. "Sorry, didn't get much sleep. Tell me about it." Some rock star on the 5th floor kept ordering room service until 4 a.m. "Speaking of which, have you seen who's staying in the presidential suite?" Maya shook her head. "Gregory Powell," Raj said, lowering his voice to a reverent whisper. The name sounded vaguely familiar. "Who?" Raj looked scandalized. "Only one of the greatest classical pianists alive. He's performing at the gala tonight. They say he can play anything after hearing it just once." A memory stirred in Maya's mind. A concert program. A standing ovation. A young Maya watching from the cheapest seats in the concert hall. Mesmerized. "I think I saw him perform once," she said. "Years ago." Before she could say more, her walkie-talkie crackled. A guest in room 712 was complaining about the temperature. Then another needed extra towels. Then someone from the Harrington Foundation needed help moving equipment for tonight's performance. The day slipped by in a blur of tasks and demands. By afternoon, Maya had almost forgotten about her conversation with Mr. Chen, until she passed by the lobby and saw the grand piano being tuned for the evening's events. She paused, watching the technician's precise movements. The piano was magnificent, a Steinway concert grand with a polished ebony finish that gleamed under the lobby lights. Maya's fingers itched to touch those perfect keys to feel their smooth resistance to draw music from them. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Maya turned to find an older woman standing beside her. She wore an elegant pantsuit and had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "Yes," Maya agreed. "It's lovely. Do you play?" the woman asked. The question caught Maya off guard. Guests rarely asked her anything personal. "I used to," she admitted, "but not anymore." Maya shrugged. "Life gets in the way sometimes." The woman nodded thoughtfully. "That it does. But music has a way of finding its way back to those who truly love it." Before Maya could respond, a young man in an expensive suit approached them. "Mrs. Harrington, they need you for the sound check." The woman, apparently the Harrington of the Harrington Foundation, smiled at Maya. "Duty calls. It was nice chatting with you." As she walked away, Maya stood frozen in place. She just had a casual conversation with the woman whose name was plastered all over the hotel, and Mrs. Harrington had spoken to her like a person, had asked about her life, had listened to her answer. It was such a small thing, and yet it felt significant somehow. The rest of the afternoon passed in a rush of preparations for the evening's main event. Maya barely had time to eat, grabbing a quick sandwich in the kitchen between tasks. By evening, she had changed into her formal serving uniform again and was helping set up the champagne fountain in the grand ballroom. The gala that night would feature several musical performances, culminating in a piece by the famous Gregory Powell. The proceeds would fund music education programs in underprivileged schools, programs not unlike the one that had first introduced Maya to the piano when she was 8 years old. As guests began to arrive in their finery, Maya found herself stationed near the stage. From there, she could see the musicians preparing, including a familiar silver-haired man, the same one who had asked her for directions yesterday without really seeing her. Gregory Powell in the flesh. Up close, he looked older than in the concert program from Maya's memory, but he had the same intense focus as he examined the piano, running his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. Maya watched him transfixed. Once she had dreamed of performing on stages like this, of having audiences fall silent when she began to play, of losing herself in the music while carrying others along with her. What would her life have been like if her father hadn't gotten sick? If she'd gone to Juilliard as planned? But then again, if things had been different, she might never have learned how strong she really was. Might never have discovered she could survive disappointment and still find moments of beauty in unexpected places. Like playing Chopin in an empty staff room at 3 a.m. As the lights dimmed for the first performance, Maya caught Mr. Chen's eye across the room. He nodded slightly, as if to say their arrangement still stood. Next weekend she would play. For the first time in years, Maya felt something shift inside her. A door she had firmly closed was creaking open again, just a crack, just enough to let in a sliver of light, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The final day of the Harrington Gala arrived with a flurry of activity. Maya had been at the hotel since 5 in the morning, handling last-minute room changes and special requests. The guests were checking out tomorrow, and everyone wanted something. Extra time, special services, impossible demands that somehow needed to be met with a smile. The woman in 814 wants her dress pressed in the next 30 minutes for tonight's closing reception, Lena told Maya, looking frazzled. And the couple in the Magnolia suite are complaining about noise from the room next door, but there's no one staying in that room. Maya nodded, adding these items to her mental list. I'll handle 814. Can you ask maintenance to check the Magnolia suite? Might be a pipe issue they're hearing. As Lena hurried off, Maya's walkie-talkie crackled again. The events coordinator's voice came through, sounding panicked. Is anyone from management there? We have an emergency in the grand ballroom. Maya grabbed the device. This is Maya from housekeeping. Mr. Chen is in a meeting. What's the problem? The pianist for tonight's closing reception just called in sick. Food poisoning. We need a replacement in... There was a pause as if she was checking the time. 4 hours. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Have you called the agency for a backup? Already tried. Everyone's booked for the holiday weekend. We need someone who can play background music for 3 hours tonight. Nothing fancy, just ambient piano while people mingle. Maya hesitated, her mind racing. This wasn't the low-key weekend gig Mr. Chen had promised her. This was the closing night of the most prestigious event of the season, with all the important guests still in attendance. I might know someone, she said finally, her mouth dry. Let me make a call and get back to you. She ended the transmission and leaned against the wall, her pulse hammering in her throat. Was she really considering this? After all these years? She hadn't practiced properly in so long. Hadn't performed for an actual audience since she was 18. But then again, it was just background music. No one would be listening closely. They'd all be too busy talking, drinking, networking. She'd be invisible just like always, only this time. She'd be invisible behind a piano instead of a serving tray. Before she could change her mind, Maya found a quiet corner and called Mr. Chen. 20 minutes later, it was settled. Maya would play the closing reception that night. She had exactly 3 hours before her shift ended to practice on the lobby piano, while it was sectioned off for tuning. Are you sure about this? Raj asked when she told him. Those people can be pretty judgmental. Maya thought about the way these guests had looked through her, not at her, for 3 days straight. How they'd snapped their fingers for service and spilled drinks on her uniform without apology. They can't judge what they don't notice, she said. I'll just be furniture to them like always. But as she sat down at the grand piano during her break, her confidence wavered. The instrument was intimidating, much larger and more responsive than the old upright in the staff room. Her fingers felt stiff and clumsy on the pristine keys. She started with scales to warm up, then moved on to some simple pieces she remembered well. Gradually, her hands remembered what to do. The music began to flow more naturally, and she felt herself relaxing into it. That sounds promising. Maya jumped and turned to find Mrs. Harrington standing nearby, a thoughtful expression on her face. I'm sorry, Maya said automatically. I was just practicing. I'll be playing tonight. The regular pianist is sick. Mrs. Harrington nodded. So I heard. You're the young woman I spoke with yesterday, aren't you? The one who used to play? Yes, ma'am. Well, it seems music has found its way back to you after all. She smiled warmly. I look forward to hearing you tonight. As she walked away, Maya felt a strange mix of terror and excitement. Someone would be listening after all, someone who mattered in the music world. The hours flew by in a blur of routine tasks and stolen moments at the piano. Before Maya knew it, it was time to prepare for the evening. She had brought a change of clothes, a simple black dress she'd worn to her father's retirement dinner last year. Nothing fancy, but more appropriate than her uniform. You look different, said Lena when they passed in the staff hallway. Good different. Like a real person instead of a hotel ghost. Maya laughed nervously. Thanks, I think. Knock 'em dead, Lena called after her. The grand ballroom had been transformed for the final event. The chairs from last night's performances had been removed. creating an open space for mingling. Small cocktail tables dotted the room, each with a tiny floral arrangement. The lighting was softer, more intimate, and in the corner, the grand piano waited. The events coordinator spotted Maya and rushed over, relief washing over her face. "Oh, thank goodness. I was afraid you might change your mind." She handed Maya a folder. "Here's some sheet music if you need it. Just standard cocktail hour stuff. You can mix in classical pieces, too. Mrs. Harrington loves the classics." Maya took the folder with shaking hands. "Where do you want me to start?" "Guests arrive in 15 minutes. If you could begin playing then and continue until around 11, with short breaks every hour or so." The coordinator squeezed Maya's arm. "You're saving our reputation here. I can't thank you enough." As the woman hurried away to handle some other crisis, Maya made her way to the piano. She set down the folder of sheet music but didn't open it. Instead, she let her fingers rest lightly on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. She could do this. It was just playing after all. The thing she'd once loved more than anything in the world. The first guests began to arrive, and Maya started with a gentle Debussy piece, Clair de Lune. Something familiar and soothing that wouldn't demand too much attention. Her first few notes were hesitant, but as the music progressed, she felt herself settling into a rhythm. No one seemed to notice her. The guests grabbed champagne from passing trays and formed small groups around the room, their chatter growing louder as more people arrived. Maya transitioned smoothly into a Schubert impromptu, then a light Mozart sonata. An hour passed, then 2. Maya took a short break, stretching her fingers and sipping water that a server had thoughtfully left for her. As she returned to the piano, she scanned the room. The crowd had grown, the noise level with it. Near the center of the room stood Gregory Powell, the famous pianist, deep in conversation with a group of admirers. Maya felt a flutter of nerves. Would he judge her playing if he heard it? Would he recognize her limited practice, her years away from serious study? She pushed the thought away and began again, this time with a Brahms intermezzo. The piece was more challenging, but it had always been one of her favorites. She closed her eyes, letting the music guide her fingers. When she opened them again, she was startled to find someone standing beside the piano, watching her. It was the man who had spilled champagne on her uniform the first night, the one who hadn't bothered to apologize properly. He was staring at her with a puzzled expression, as if trying to place her face. Maya kept playing, her cheeks burning. Had he recognized her as the server he'd humiliated? Or was he just another wealthy guest annoyed by something about her performance? He moved away after a moment, rejoining his friends across the room. Maya exhaled slowly, trying to refocus on the music. But now she felt self-conscious, aware of every missed note, every slight hesitation. The next piece in her mental playlist was Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. It was ambitious, one of the most challenging pieces in the piano repertoire, full of technical difficulties and emotional depth. Perhaps too ambitious for background music at a cocktail reception. But something inside Maya rebelled at the thought of playing it safe. These people had made her feel small for days. They'd looked through her, past her, around her. Maybe it was time to play something they couldn't ignore. She took a deep breath and began. The opening notes of the ballad rang out, deceptively simple. But as the piece progressed, it grew in complexity and intensity. Maya's fingers flew across the keys, muscle memory taking over where conscious practice had lapsed. The music built and receded like ocean waves, delicate passages giving way to thundering chords. Maya forgot where she was. Forgot about the guests and their judgment. Forgot about her aching feet and her borrowed dress and the years she'd spent pushing this part of herself away. There was only the music, demanding, beautiful, completely absorbing. She didn't notice when the first conversation trailed off. Didn't see when people began to turn toward the piano, drinks forgotten in their hands. Didn't realize that the room was growing quieter as more and more guests stopped to listen. By the time the piece reached its dramatic conclusion, the ballroom had fallen almost completely silent. Maya played the final notes, letting them hang in the air before slowly lifting her hands from the keys, and then she heard it. Applause. Startled, she looked up to find that most of the room was watching her. Some people were clapping enthusiastically, others staring in obvious surprise. Near the front stood Mrs. Harrington, a satisfied smile on her face as if she'd known all along what would happen. And there, Making his way through the crowd toward the piano was Gregory Powell himself. Maya's stomach dropped. She'd drawn attention to herself, the exact opposite of what she'd intended. Now one of the world's greatest pianists was approaching her, probably to point out all the flaws in her rusty performance. She stood up, ready to apologize, to explain that she was just the replacement, just filling in, just a housekeeper who used to play a long time ago. But when Gregory Powell reached her, the expression on his face wasn't critical. It was intrigued. "That was Chopin's Ballet No. 1, he said. Not a question, but a statement." Maya nodded, unable to find her voice. "One of the most technically challenging pieces in the repertoire." He tilted his head, studying her. "Where did you study?" I was going to attend Juilliard, but..." She trailed off, feeling ridiculous. Who was she to be having this conversation with Gregory Powell? "But," he prompted. "Life happened," she said simply. Something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. He nodded slowly. "Would you play something else?" he asked. "Perhaps the Chopin Nocturne in E-flat major?" Maya's eyes widened. That was exactly what she'd been playing in the staff room when Mr. Chen had heard her. Yes, I could do that." As she sat back down at the piano, she noticed that a small crowd had gathered around them. The man who'd spilled champagne on her was there, his expression confused as he finally placed where he'd seen her before. So was the woman who had snapped her fingers for shrimp. So were dozens of others who had looked through Maya for days, who had treated her as if she were invisible. They could see her now. With a deep breath, Maya began to play again. The nocturne flowed from Maya's fingers like water, gentle, fluid, and hauntingly beautiful. She kept her eyes on the keys, too nervous to look at the faces of the people gathered around the piano. People who just hours earlier wouldn't have given her a second glance. People who now watched her with rapt attention as if seeing her for the first time. In a way they were. When she finished, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Maya felt her cheeks flush with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was just filling in, just playing background music while the important people talked among themselves. She wasn't supposed to become the center of attention. "That was exquisite," said Gregory Powell, his voice carrying over the applause. "Your technique is remarkable, especially for someone who hasn't formally studied." "I did study," Maya found herself saying. "Just not at the college level. I had a teacher from age 8 until 18, Mrs. Abernathy. She used to play with the City Symphony." Powell nodded appreciatively. "She taught you well. You have a natural sensitivity to the music that can't be taught." Before Maya could respond, Mrs. Harrington stepped forward. "I think we'd all love to hear more," she said, glancing around at the gathered crowd. "Would you mind continuing?" Maya looked past them to the events coordinator, who gave an enthusiastic thumbs up. Apparently, having a hotel staff member suddenly become the entertainment was fine, as long as the guests were happy. "What would you like to hear?" Maya asked, her voice steadier than she expected. "Beethoven," called someone from the back. "Moonlight Sonata." "No more Chopin," said another voice. Gregory Powell smiled at the competing requests. "Perhaps you could play whatever moves you at this moment," he suggested quietly. "The audience will follow where a confident performer leads." Maya took a deep breath. Confident? Was that how she felt? Not exactly. But something else was bubbling up inside her. Something that felt like a strange mix of joy and defiance and release. She chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor. It was dramatic and intense, with crashing chords and swift runs that had once made her teacher throw up her hands in delight when Maya mastered them. She hadn't played it in years, but her fingers remembered. As she played, Maya finally allowed herself to look up at the audience. Their faces showed surprise, appreciation, and in some cases outright shock. The man who had spilled champagne on her uniform stood near the front, his mouth slightly open as he watched her hands move across the keys. The woman who had snapped her fingers for service was recording the performance on her phone. And there, at the back of the crowd, stood Raj and Lena and several other hotel staff members having snuck in to watch. They were beaming with vicarious pride. When she finished the Rachmaninoff, someone handed her a glass of water. Someone else asked where she had learned to play like that. A woman in an expensive dress wanted to know if she gave lessons. "I work here," Maya heard herself saying, the words falling into a momentary lull in the chatter. I'm the housekeeping supervisor. A confused silence followed. Maya could almost see the wheels turning in their minds as they tried to reconcile the person who had cleaned their rooms and brought them fresh towels with the woman who had just played Rachmaninoff with professional skill. Well, said Mrs. Harrington after a moment, it seems the Westbrook has been hiding a remarkable talent in plain sight. There was an awkward ripple of laughter, and then the questions resumed. Where had she studied? Why wasn't she performing professionally? Had she recorded anything they could listen to? Maya answered as best she could, feeling increasingly surreal. These were the same people who had looked through her for days, and now they were hanging on her every word. I think our pianist needs a proper break. Gregory Powell finally intervened, noticing Maya's overwhelmed expression. Perhaps we could continue the performance after she's had a chance to rest. Grateful for the reprieve, Maya slipped away to the small anteroom off the ballroom. She sat down heavily in a chair, her hands trembling slightly from adrenaline and exertion. What had just happened out there? How had she gone from invisible server to the main event in one evening? The door opened and Lena poked her head in. Can I come in? The dragon lady at the door tried to stop me, but I told her I had to bring you water. She held up a bottle as evidence. Maya laughed. Get in here. Lena entered and closed the door behind her. Holy cow, Maya, you were amazing out there. Why didn't you ever tell us you could play like that? It never came up, Maya said with a small shrug. And honestly, I haven't played seriously in years. I'm probably going to wake up tomorrow with my arms falling off. Well, you could have fooled everyone out there. They're all talking about you. Lena handed her the water bottle. Mr. Chen looks like he might pass out from excitement. He keeps telling everyone it was his idea to have you play. Maya rolled her eyes. Of course he is. So what happens now? Are you going to play the rest of the night? I guess so. Maya took a long drink of water. It's not like I have much choice at this point. Oh, please. You loved every minute of it. I saw your face. Before Maya could reply, there was a knock at the door. Lena opened it to find Gregory Powell standing there. May I have a word? He asked, looking at Maya. Lena backed toward the door. I should get back to work anyway. Those glasses won't serve themselves. She gave Maya an exaggerated thumbs up behind Powell's back before slipping out. Powell sat in the chair across from Maya. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands that came from decades of playing. Hands not so different from her father's, really, marked by years of work and dedication. I want to be direct, he said without preamble. You have a gift. It would be a shame to let it go to waste. Maya shifted uncomfortably. I'm not wasting it. I still play, just not professionally. When was the last time you performed for an audience before tonight? She had to think about it. My high school graduation? 10 years ago. Powell nodded as if she'd confirmed something he already suspected. And in those 10 years, have you ever regretted not pursuing music further? The question hit harder than Maya expected. Had she regretted it? Of course she had. There were nights when she'd lie awake imagining an alternate life where her father hadn't gotten sick, where she'd gone to Juilliard as planned, where she'd performed on stages around the world instead of serving drinks to people who didn't see her. But regret wasn't a luxury she could afford. Not when there were bills to pay and responsibilities to meet. It doesn't matter, she said finally. I made my choice. What if you could make a different one now? Maya looked up sharply. What do you mean? I'm starting a new program at the conservatory. Master classes for talented musicians who took unconventional paths. People who might have been concert pianists under different circumstances, but whose lives led them elsewhere. He leaned forward slightly. People like you. Maya's heart skipped a beat. I don't understand. What kind of program? Weekend intensive courses, professional instruction, opportunities to perform with the symphony for those who qualify. He smiled slightly. No Juilliard degree required, just talent and dedication. I couldn't afford something like that, Maya said automatically. It's fully funded by the Harrington Foundation. No cost to participants. Maya stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. And you want me to, what, apply? I want you to be our first student. Powell handed her a business card. Think about it. Call me next week if you're interested. After he left, Maya sat holding the card, turning it over in her fingers. Was this really happening? It felt like a dream, the kind she used to have when she first started working at the hotel. where someone would discover her talent and whisk her away to a better life. But dreams didn't usually come true while you were wearing a borrowed dress and nursing sore feet from a double shift. There was another knock at the door. This time it was Mrs. Harrington. "The natives are getting restless out there," she said with a smile. "They're asking for an encore. Are you up for it?" Maya hesitated, Powell's card still in her hand. "He told you about the program, I take it?" Mrs. Harrington nodded toward the card. "Yes, it sounds amazing, but I don't know if I can—" "Oh, I think you can," Mrs. Harrington interrupted gently. "I heard you play. Gregory heard you play. More importantly, you heard yourself play tonight. Tell me, how did it feel?" Maya thought about it. How had it felt to lose herself in the music again after so long? To let the notes flow through her fingers and into the room? To look up and see people actually listening, really listening, to something she'd created? "It felt right," she said simply. Mrs. Harrington nodded as if that settled everything. "Well then, shall we go back out there and give them what they're asking for?" Maya tucked the business card carefully into her dress pocket and stood up. "Let's go." The moment she returned to the ballroom, a hush fell over the crowd. Maya made her way to the piano, aware of all the eyes following her. This time she didn't feel uncomfortable under their gaze. This time she welcomed it. As she sat down at the piano, she spotted the champagne-spilling guest from the first night. He was watching her with an odd expression, confusion mixed with something that might have been respect. Maya met his eyes directly for the first time. "Any requests?" she asked, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet room. He looked startled to be addressed personally. I don't know much about classical music." "That's all right," Maya said, a small smile playing at her lips. "I know enough for both of us." She turned back to the piano and began to play again, a piece she'd composed herself years ago, when dreams of Juilliard were still fresh and possible. It wasn't perfect. There were passages she fumbled slightly, transitions that could have been smoother, but it was hers, completely and undeniably hers. And as she played, Maya realized something important. These people might be seeing her for the first time tonight, but she was also seeing herself clearly for the first time in years, the person she'd been before life intervened. The musician who had gotten lost beneath the uniform and the responsibilities and the daily grind of making ends meet. That person hadn't disappeared after all. She'd just been waiting for the right moment to reemerge, and judging by the rapt expressions on the faces around her, that moment was now. 6 months could change everything. Maya realized as she straightened her dark blue blazer and checked her reflection one last time. 6 months ago, she had been wearing a hotel uniform, carrying trays of champagne for people who looked through her. Today, she was preparing to play her first official concert with the City Symphony as part of Gregory Powell's new program. The backstage area of the concert hall hummed with activity. Musicians tuned their instruments. Staff members hurried about with clipboards and nervous performers paced in tight circles. Maya sat quietly on a folding chair, her hands resting in her lap. She should have been terrified, and part of her was, but mostly she felt strangely calm, as if she'd been working toward this moment her whole life, which in a way she had. Nervous? Asked Diane, another pianist in the program. She was a former accountant who had studied at Curtis Institute before family obligations pulled her away from music. Maya smiled. "A little. You?" "Terrified," Diane admitted. "I keep telling myself that no matter what happens, I can always go back to spreadsheets." "And I can always go back to changing sheets," Maya said with a small laugh. But she wasn't going back, not full-time anyway. After that night at the gala, everything had changed. Mr. Chen had approached her the very next morning with an offer to become the hotel's regular pianist 4 nights a week. With a salary that matched her housekeeping position, she'd accepted on the condition that she could keep supervising her housekeeping team during day shifts. She wasn't ready to abandon the people who had become like family to her over the years. Then came Powell's program. Weekend master classes at first, then private lessons, then invitations to audition for small performances. Maya had thrown herself into practice with the same determination she'd once applied to building her career at the hotel. Every free moment was spent at the piano, relearning techniques that had grown rusty, pushing herself to recover the skills she'd once possessed and then go beyond it. Her father had cried when she told him about the program. "Your mother would have been so proud," he'd said, squeezing her hand. "She always said you were meant for bigger things." A stagehand appeared at the door. 10 minutes, everyone. Maya took a deep breath. The concert tonight was a showcase featuring all 12 musicians from Powell's program. Each would perform one piece with the full symphony before they all came together for a final ensemble number. Maya was scheduled to play Grieg's piano concerto in a minor, a challenging piece she'd fallen in love with during her lessons. Gregory Powell appeared beside her chair. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be," she replied. He nodded approvingly. "I reviewed the final rehearsal recording. You've made remarkable progress. I've had a good teacher." Powell smiled at that. "Teachers can only point the way. The journey is entirely yours." He glanced toward the stage door. "Your family is here?" Maya nodded. Her father was in the audience, along with Lena and Raj and several other hotel staff members who had insisted on coming to support her. They'd been her most enthusiastic cheerleaders these past months, covering her shifts when she needed extra practice time, listening patiently to her worries about not being good enough. "And some special guests, I hear," Powell added with a knowing look. Maya felt her cheeks warm slightly. Mrs. Harrington had called personally to say she would be attending with some members of the foundation board. The Westbrook Hotel had also purchased a block of tickets for their most valued clients, including, Maya had been told, several guests who had attended that fateful gala 6 months ago. 5 minutes. Called the stagehand. Powell squeezed Maya's shoulder gently. "Remember what we talked about. This is not about proving anything to anyone. This is about the music, the conversation between you, the piano, and the orchestra. Everything else falls away when you focus on that." He moved on to speak with the other performers, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. Was he right? Was this really not about proving something? Part of her wanted to believe that, but she couldn't deny the small thrill she felt knowing that people who once hadn't seen her at all would now be watching her center stage. The first performers were called, and the backstage area gradually emptied. Maya could hear applause filtering through the heavy doors, rising and falling as each musician took their turn. All too soon it was just her and the stagehand waiting in the wings. "Ms. Rivera, you're next." Maya stood, smoothing her hands down the sides of her concert dress, a simple, elegant gown that she'd saved 3 paychecks to afford. Not borrowed this time. Hers. She walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. The applause washed over her as she made her way to the gleaming grand piano at the center. The conductor, a kind woman who had been endlessly patient during rehearsals, nodded in greeting as Maya took her seat and adjusted the bench. Maya's eyes found her father in the 5th row, beaming with pride. Next to him sat Lena, practically bouncing with excitement. A few rows back, she spotted Mrs. Harrington and the foundation board members. And there, near the front, was the man who had spilled champagne on her uniform that first night of the gala. He was looking at the program, then back at her, recognition dawning on his face. Maya turned away, focusing instead on the piano before her. This beautiful instrument with its perfect keys and rich sound. This old friend who had waited so patiently for her to return. The conductor raised her baton. The orchestra fell silent, poised and ready. Maya placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath, and then she began to play. The opening chords of the Grieg concerto rang out, bold and dramatic. The orchestra joined in, surrounding her notes with their own, creating a tapestry of sound that filled the concert hall. Maya let the music carry her forward, through the delicate passages and the thundering climaxes, through the moments of tension and release. Time seemed to both stretch and compress. What felt like mere minutes was actually the full 35 minutes of the concerto. Before she knew it, Maya was playing the final triumphant section, her fingers flying across the keys with a certainty she had once thought lost forever. The last chord hung in the air for a breathless moment before the audience erupted in applause. Maya stood, slightly dazed, as people rose to their feet, a standing ovation. For her, she bowed, first to the audience, then to the conductor and orchestra. Flowers were brought to the stage, a bouquet of roses from the program organizers. Maya accepted them with a smile that threatened to split her face in two. As she left the stage, still floating on adrenaline and joy, Gregory Powell was waiting in the wings. "Magnificent," he said simply. Maya couldn't speak. Her heart was too full. The rest of the concert passed in a blur. The final ensemble piece went off without a hitch, and then all 12 performers were taking their bows together. linking hands in a show of solidarity and shared accomplishment. Backstage was chaos afterward. Family members with flowers, photographers from local papers, board members offering congratulations. Maya hugged her father tightly when he finally made his way through the crowd. "Your mother would have loved this," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I felt her with me," Maya said. And she had. A presence at her shoulder, a voice in her ear saying, "That's my girl." Lena and Raj appeared, both talking over each other in their excitement. "You were amazing," Lena practically shouted. "Everyone was saying so. The hotel director wants to know if you'll play a special concert in the grand ballroom next month," Raj added. "Says he'll pay whatever you ask," Maya laughed. "Let me enjoy tonight first before booking the next gig." As the crowd began to thin, Maya found herself face to face with the champagne-spilling guest from the gala. He looked different somehow, less imposing than she remembered. "Ms. Rivera," he said, clearly having learned her name from the program. "I wanted to congratulate you on your performance." "Thank you," she said politely. He hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "I also wanted to apologize. I was at the Harrington Gala 6 months ago, and I wasn't very considerate to the staff. To you specifically. Maya hadn't expected this. You remember that? It would be hard to forget after seeing you play that night." He looked genuinely embarrassed now. "I didn't see you properly then. I'm sorry for that." For a moment, Maya considered how to respond. 6 months ago, she might have clung to the resentment savored this moment of vindication. But standing here now, with the applause still ringing in her ears and a future full of possibilities stretching before her, she found that the old hurt had lost its sting. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said simply. "I hope you enjoyed the music." Later, as the concert hall emptied and the cleaning crew began their work, a fact Maya noticed with particular empathy, she found herself alone at the piano once more. Everyone else had gone to the reception, but she'd needed a moment of quiet first. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, not pressing down, just feeling their smooth coolness beneath her fingertips. So much had changed in 6 months. So much could change in the next 6. Gregory Powell had mentioned a potential teaching position at the conservatory. The symphony director had hinted at future concerts. Mrs. Harrington had introduced her to people who could open doors Maya hadn't even known existed, but what mattered most wasn't the opportunities or the recognition. What mattered was that she'd found her way back to this, to music, to the thing that made her feel most alive and most herself. "There you are," said Mrs. Harrington, appearing in the doorway. "Everyone's looking for you at the reception," Maya smiled. "Just saying a quick thank you to my old friend here," she said, patting the piano. Mrs. Harrington nodded understandingly. "Well, when you're done, there are some people I'd like you to meet. People who might be interested in sponsoring your first solo recital." "Solo recital?" Maya echoed, her eyes widening. "Only if you're interested, of course." Mrs. Harrington's eyes twinkled. "But something tells me you might be." After she left, Maya sat for a moment longer, letting the possibility sink in. A solo recital. Her name alone on the program. Her music filling a concert hall. It wasn't the future she'd planned for herself at 18. It was something different. Something that incorporated both the girl who'd dreamed of Juilliard and the woman who'd learned about resilience and hard work during those years at the hotel. Something uniquely her own. Maya played a single perfect chord, bright and clear and full of promise. Then she stood, smoothed her dress, and walked toward the door, toward the people waiting for her, toward whatever came next. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was exactly where she was meant to be.